This way. Where does it go?
Okay, then we're gonna let you guys tell me where to go from here. But what you're gonna see here, because this parking lot is fairly new, but I think you're just standing here looking at the elevation of the ground. Do you see that it gets kind of higher when you get over to the other side of the lot? And you see it's low where we are. So it's going to be going through here somewhere, huh? And what we're going to do is look at the asphalt surface. This is not really thick, heavy asphalt. It's very weak material, so it pulls apart and forms cracks. So it's a good place to see the details of what a fault looks like where it's coming to the surface. And you have to remember that if you're called out to map something, a lot of times I can see it here, but I can see it 20 feet over there, but not in between. That it can be doing a lot of things over a distance of 20 feet. And you're going to see some of that as we go along. So I'll get you started here. Follow this, and it's not going in a straight line. It has offsets to that. So go ahead and now, sometimes in the field, the distance between that one and this offset may be as much as a mile. It may only be a few hundred feet, or like here, only a few feet.
Is that one of your marks there?
Nope. That's some surveyors put that in. So it looks like we've got a signal in this one.
Now it's going back.
Yeah, right. So here we are. We're coming back on this thing, back on the track. Yeah.
We're on the right track.
Yeah.
What about this one over here, Carl?
Yeah.
Here you see some vertical displacement across it.
Just changing the parking lot.
That slope, and it gave you the illusion of a reverse fault, which shows you cannot look at these faults in two dimensions, because that's not going to tell you what the true orientation of the fault is. You've got to be able to see them in three dimensions.
Where was that pit that you talking about?
Right on the other side of the Beltway.
Oh, it's now a detention basin.
Right.
There?
If you go back through the HGS archives, you can see the article. We even we gave the specs and asked people to give us the strike and dip of the fault based on the information we gave them.
Okay, I'll look for that.
You know, I have to go pull out your old college structural geology book. Now we're going to go on over here. I'm just waiting on Carl. We're going to let you guys see if you can trace it out over to the freeway. In detail when you map this, because you got to balance here. You got to make sure there's no room for error with these faults when you're working for a client. So you don't want to waste land, but then you don't want to cut it too close where you're taking too much risk. So you got a balance that you've got to come up with there. So you want to establish a fault hazard zone that incorporates the ground movement and the variation of the fault. And so even something like this would take some detailed mapping across here in the field. You wouldn't just shoot a few points across here and go put best. You go in here, you try to map this in some detail.
And that building. And you'll be able to see it if you walk through the weeds and brush and stuff there. You'll see the change in elevation of the ground where the fault is. The first time I tried to look in there, I figured it was going to be running right through that building, so I went in and asked the manager in there if I could go in and look at the floor and so forth. He said, yeah, okay. So I'm walking around everywhere. I got nothing sign of any fault. That building had been there long enough. And I knew it was active and moving down here. Shit, something should show up here. So the next thing I did was go outside of the building and start walking along this south wall. There it is. And you can trace it almost all the way down to Kessler, next major north-south street east of us here.
It parallels the railroad track? Is that
It's running between the railroad tracks and that building, yeah. That zone. They've got fences all over the place. I don't think you can even get back there now.
So how does it express itself? Does it just look like a
There's a
ditch
scarp
or something?
There's a scarp like out on the reservoir.
Okay, but there would be the ballast from the track on the one side.
Oh, you
Scarp
mean
on the
if
other.
it
Is there
crosses
water
the
mounted
railroad
in there?
track?
Yeah.
If it crosses the railroad tracks. Well, the railroad people are very careful about their tracks. If they didn't do something under where this fault is going across, they'd have big problems.
Oh, sure.
The railroad spikes would be popping out, tracks spreading. They got derailed trains.
Sure.
So they're out there knocking new ballast underneath the tracks all the time.
So the fault does go under the track?
Oh yes, it goes under the tracks.
That's what
Absolutely, between here and this building.
How about
the fractures through the asphalt in the parking lot, and we're on trend. We're about north 70 east, north 80 east, and we're looking to where it's going to intersect Beltway 8. And what we noticed is in the concrete on Beltway 8, we've seen clues on the way here of the continuation of the fracture trend. When you get here, there's some concrete, and in between the expansion joints, you see a couple more bigger cracks in here. But the big thing to note is behind the stanchion that's holding up the roadway. That roadway has extra support. It's the only stanchion that has the extra support. And if you look above the roadway, there's pretty good expansion in the two sides. So if you look at the other expansion on a couple of the other parts of the roadway, there's a real separation right above that extra support. So that's what Dr. Norman says is they're monitoring very closely because it's an extension of the Long Point Fault through Beltway 8.
This house was built in 1956, and we've got a picture of it here on page 17. That was taken in 1977, so that's what, 21 years. This picture was taken 21 years after the house was first built. And you see what happened. The roof line of the house had dropped 24 inches in that 21 years. So if you own a house like this and you've got the money to spend, you can continue to live in it. But it's not a comfortable house to live in when the floors are not at the same level downstairs.
Inside the
Yeah.
step.
Right.
Or you were lucky enough to convince a foundation company into giving you one of the contracts where they re-level it for free. Old Town still gives contracts that once they do it, they'll re-level it for free.
But you're going to have to spend the money somewhere else.
Well, but you have to spend it up front.
Yeah.
They're expensive up front. I spent $30,000 on my house to get it leveled the first time, but they'll
Wow.
come back out. All I have to do is tell them.
Yeah, otherwise maybe 8,000-10,000 would have been plenty. So you pay for it.
Yeah.
So Dr. Norman, are you going
Look at the sidewalk.
visit with these
Yeah.
people if they come over and want an explanation?
Why
Why we're staring at their house?
No, but there was a lady from Columbia that owned this house for several years, 10,
I
12
remember
years.
she invited us in her house
Yeah.
to look at it.
Yeah, she invited us in.
Did.
And we thought, no, we got too many people. No, that's okay, come on, come on.
They had
She wanted us to see your
concrete was
backyard.
like this, and they built a step so you could step up.
Yeah, you had to walk up steps from the bedroom and up into the dining room. Okay.
You're watching out for us, you know?
To do that, again, because this is a steeply dipping fault, it's a steep scarp, and when he would drive into the garage, the front wheels are up here, and when those wheels started dropping down when he got in the garage, he high centered, scraped the bottom of his car. In other words, his car is doing this, trying to get rid of this. So what he did was to at the end of his driveway, just outside the garage, he put dirt where you see concrete and so forth, bricks. And he built a little
Retaining wall.
no,
Oh, the
carport.
Yeah.
A carport. He built a carport, yeah. And so, because he couldn't drive into his garage anymore, so he made that into a playroom for kids and stuff. And now he's removed the carport, and you see, he's probably got about 3 feet from the level of his driveway up to where those top bricks are.
One other thing too is that this is not the owner, this is the new owner. And the original owner, he had to re-level the house several times. But it was economical for him because he had a foundation repair business. So he could do it for himself.
Yeah.
Okay. So
He was sort of at the edge of the
Right at the edge.
of the top
That
rock.
place, yeah.
So this corner curled down, but it was easy to just jack that up and put a pier on it. It was okay. So it wasn't a big repair. Putting a whole bunch of piers on it.
Not the one quarter.
Yeah.
Did I would think that the pile of bricks is the top.
It's like it's all tilted.
They had a pickup truck. They had a When you have a fault underneath the house, you're shifting the load of that roof towards the back and corner of his house. So these members inside were once vertical are now tilted. And so the house isn't built to withstand that. So the more tilting that goes on, the weaker it gets, the less support that roof is getting. And finally, okay, thank you. But I did mention to my group at least that the city of Houston kind of keeps a watch on these things. And they'll go in and inspect. And if they decide that that house is a risk, unfit for human occupancy, they're going to order it torn down. And the owner is the one who has to pay for the costs of building it. So they'll tell the owner, we'll give you 60 days to tear this house down. It's not fit for human consumption. And if you don't, then after the 60 days, we're going to come out and tear it down, and we'll send you the bill. So it's going to happen. And that's done in a number of places around. It's been done in a number of places around Houston. They have the right to do that. For some reason, this house survives. I don't know.
Are there restrictions on, can they have gas lines in there or anything?
What's that?
Can they have natural gas lines put in there?
They probably, I don't know if they do or not, but that's also a problem because utility lines. The other thing is people that were living in houses like this for a few years, it's like living in, what do they call those houses at the state fair? Gravity houses. You walk into this house and the floors are tilting. Yeah. That's what it's like. And you're trying to adjust your brain to this, you know. It drives you crazy. So they can only stand to be there so long. So most of them move out and rent it to somebody else they can rent it to for a low price. Until they can afford to, say, straighten it up. But like I say, I have said, there are homes that are sitting around here in Houston, like this, are sitting on faults that have been there for 50, 60 years. And people keep paying the cost because they like the neighborhood and the neighbors, and they don't want to move out. They just want to stay here and fight the problem.
Oh, we got a stop sign right there.
That's still there.
Oh, he's hanging
He's
on.
still kicking.
People, how many is that your biggest investments in life?
Or it just dropped off.
But why? How do you know?
I don't.
Yeah, you do. There's your direction of movement. So you have these complexities of movement on these faults. So some type of engineered structure, a linear structure crossing the fault, is just not breaking it and pulling apart. You got to take in these extra components, directions of movement. And the engineers need to know this information for their design work. So in this case, it goes from here to here. And that's the direction of the movement. And it's dip slip. So as Carl said earlier, we have found no evidence of strike slip components to these faults.
Now somebody might come along and think that this is strike slip. Here we see the fault. It must be strike slip. But you got to remember, the fault is entirely independent of these roads. It was here tens of thousands of years before the roads were. And this side to the southeast is pulling away. So like Richard pointed out with his toes here, this point here was with this one. So it's moved over here and down. It's not strike slip. It's due to it appears to be because of the angle the fault is making across the pavement. If the fault went across this way, you wouldn't have that offset, would you? Because your direction of movement then would be directly down here. Instead, it's this way. So it's picking up this horizontal component that makes it look like a strike slip fault.
Yeah, that gap is your horizontal component. They have to account for this kind of movement.
How do they do it? Do they use a piece of flexible in between?
They try to put in flexibility where they can, and in some places, like you saw over on Westview, they put in access faults where they can quickly go in there.
Just wait till it fails and then replace it?
Because that corner of the house had fallen off. So they cut the slab, notched it back, and rebuilt the house like that, and they saved the house. Now it looks like they're in the deformation zone, so they're getting a little bit of movement, but they're not in a lot of movement. So if I can cut it back, we can see it better. We don't understand why this house is still standing. I call this the teacup house because it's shaped like a teacup.
They're filling in cracks in their
Cross section of a teacup. Look at those window frames. Here's a fun exercise. Try to look up the value on all these houses with an HCAD. And you'll see they have value. They have value.
Land value or
Building value too.